Welcome to the Pro Design Builder Podcast, a show where professionals and entrepreneurs share their stories, strategies, and secrets to building a thriving business and a successful life. I'm Sam, your host, as we dive deep into the world of life experiences and entrepreneurship. So, before we get going, I would like to thank our sponsors. The Pro Design Builder is a coaching and consulting firm for real estate investors who want to build spec homes and multi-family development. The Pro Design Builder, it's not just about building a business, it's about building a vision and a life by design. Also, we have a house flipping 101 boot camp, March 26th and 27th in Tampa, and April 16th and 17th in Fort Lauderdale. Also, just wanted to thank our other sponsor, the Nest Collab, which is a incubator for real estate investors. We have multiple areas of expertise. If you want to get involved with other like-minded individuals, do it at the Nest Collab. As you know, foster care is near and dear to my heart. I've fostered a number of kids. I've adopted 2 kids I'm currently fostering now. If you ever feel led to give to our initiative, there'll be a link in the description to do so. Some of the things that we support are things that we are getting supported with right now. Sometimes an additional meal as the primary cook in the house and not having to worry about a meal for that night is a big, great help, especially with a family of 6. So we provide additional meals for foster families. We also purchase beds and cribs for foster and or adoptive families that are just getting themselves together. Another thing too, we feel strongly about a strong family. So if we could get them an additional date night, that's something that we feel long term is the best thing for the family unit. So without further ado, just wanted to introduce our guest today, Kristy Towson, Inner Strength Writing Solution, an author with a message of hope, resilience, empowerment. Speak Up Against Stigma. Her mental health journey is a powerful reminder that mental health illness is not a weakness, that seeking help is a brave and necessary step towards healing. So just wanted to, hopefully I did you justice in that introduction. And if you don't mind, just tell people a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I think you nailed it, Sam. I think you
So
nailed it.
did I?
It's something that you didn't mention that we actually never spoke about.
What? Which
But
was
since
what?
this is a real estate show, I have probably about 22 years of real estate experience.
Oh, fantastic.
So I started out as a realtor, then
Uh-huh.
I became a broker, and then I became an investor, and I had about like 30 properties.
Oh,
I
wow.
wholesale them all at this point. So I'm starting
Hmm.
from scratch, but I am getting back into real estate investing. So maybe we can have a side conversation about that.
No, for sure, for sure, for sure. We anytime that we could talk shop when it comes to real estate is I'm fair game for that. So
Awesome.
but we'll get to that. I'm more interested in kind of investing in you and investing in your story and kind of getting those layers, and then we'll hop into the business side of things. So where are you from? Where you live right now?
I'm in Baltimore County, not quite Baltimore City, but a little further out in the suburbs of Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay, is that where you grew up?
I grew up in the inner city of Baltimore, but now, I'm all Diddy and stuff. I live in the county.
Okay. No, perfect, perfect, perfect. So let's we typically start at the beginning. So I'm gonna go back a little bit. What were you like as a kid, and were there early signs of your path today?
So I was an only child growing up. My mom, she did adopt a family member when I was an adult. And so now I have a brother. But I grew up as an only child, like I said, in the inner cities of Baltimore. And it was fun, like back in the day, we did hopscotch. We were running up and down the street playing dodgeball. One of my early signs of entrepreneurship, I had to be around maybe like 16.
Mhm.
And I saw my mom cry before she was leaving out for work. And it was the weight of her job that
Mhm.
had her in such a disarray. And I've never seen my mother emotional, like ever.
Yeah.
So for me to see her crying because of the weight of her job, I said to myself, I'm never working for anybody. And I haven't.
Mhm.
So it was that moment that had implanted a seed in me of entrepreneurship. I didn't know that that's what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. But somehow, some way, that always stood with me. And to this day, I can say I've been an entrepreneur since I was about 16, 17 years old.
Yep, yep, yep. So it's definitely in your blood. For me, entrepreneurship started early for me as well, with selling, 25-cent candies that we would buy a bag and they were equivalent to like 10 or 5 cents each. And then I'll make 20 cents and then I'd reinvest it. That was the first part, and for me too, my family situation, we came from the islands, we came from Haiti. So my parents were always working. They were never able to like come to my like games and stuff like that when I started, playing sports. But I just remember when I, I was lucky enough to go to private school and play football. But one of the dads would be in the stands and I would see him. He'd come and he'd sit in the same spot every day. And then I just said to him, like, what does your dad do that he could come and sit in the stands every day and watch you practice? He was like, he's a business owner. And then that kind of like sparked me. I was like, I want to be able to have the ability to do that. So then I started asking all of the other kids around me, what does your parents do? What does your parents do? Some is attorney, some is a business owner, some is a doctor, some is a business owner. But the general consensus was business. And so I knew then entrepreneurship was definitely something that was up my alley. So, yep, yep, yep.
Awesome.
So, who would you say was your biggest influence growing up?
That's a really good question, and my knee jerk reaction is my mom, because my father passed away when I was a young girl, and I watched her bring me up. She didn't struggle. She worked for the post office, and she must have managed her money really well because I thought that we were rich
Hmm.
growing up. We weren't, but
No.
well, not we, but she. It wasn't my money.
Yeah, exactly.
um we weren't rich, but we lived a really good life.
Hmm.
And it was from that I learned principles about how to manage money and things like that. Because when I got into the real world, I was shaken up because it was harder than she made it look.
Hmm.
Like she made it look really easy because I never saw her complain
Yep.
about money. I never saw her complain about food. I never came home when the lights weren't on. And I had a water bed when I was like in middle school. So I really
Hmm.
thought that I was doing something, right?
Yeah.
My mom has been a real staple. And when life kind of did its own thing, like in a negative spiral, she was
Yeah.
there for me. And she's always been there for me to love on me in my high moments and also in my low moments. And I really appreciate her for just being consistent in who she is.
All right, great, great, great. That's great that you had that example. Did you have extended family around you as well?
My aunt, my mom's sister, I call her my auntie mommy because she has that flair and that spark and that fire like that my mother didn't have. That as a child, I wish she had had that fire. Like we all have those family members that tells it like it is, that puts
Hmm.
people in their place,
Yeah.
and she didn't take any crap. And I always
Hmm.
looked up to her. And the part of me was like, I want to be like her when I grow up because she didn't take anything, but she was always laughing, always having
Yep. Yep. Yep.
fun.
Yep. Yep.
And it was just such an amazing experience just to have my mom and my aunt who played a very instrumental part in my upbringing.
Okay. So you say your dad passed away early. How did that experience affect you?
You know, I'm a writer and
Hmm.
I often write this like paragraph. I haven't been able to use it yet, but it's like buried in my head. Um,
Hmm.
I often say that I was born on Father's Day to a man who wanted nothing to do with me.
Hmm.
And when he passed away, it was just like a stranger had passed away. I felt nothing.
Hmm.
And um, that's what I said, but in actuality, that wasn't true. I think subconsciously there was something on the inside of me that was just wrestling with the fact that I didn't have a father who was present. Um, and when I was a teenager, I got into a lot of trouble. And the officials or the adults around me would always pinpoint it to my father being, deceased. And I will always fight against that, saying, no, that's not the case because I felt nothing. I
Hmm.
didn't really feel the impact of not having a father until I was like in my 40s.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks where I was just wondering, like how could he be absent? And he had other children, but for
Hmm.
me, he just wasn't there and took no interest that I can remember. And that was hurtful because of the experiences that I had growing up with men and boys and things like that. It was troubling to navigate through.
No, for sure. It's one of those things where um you don't see exactly how all of it plays out with having that missing piece. And there's something about when for me, I'm lucky that I had my parents present, but then all of the other kids that I grew up around, they did not. And you could see that how certain pieces that were missing would affect them, in the moment, and then also it affects them, long term. Even like with a lot of my guy friends, that they talk about their, father experience, or lack of father experience, and them trying to grasp at straws to figure out what is a man and what he's supposed to be like and how he's supposed to function and operate. And for me, I had that built in, so I kind of mimic him, so to speak. So it's always good to try to just get that perspective, so people
Yeah,
can get an understanding.
totally.
Hmm. Was there a defining moment in your childhood that you would say?
Around like my father or
Just
just in general?
in general.
Let's see, my childhood, it's a blur.
Mhm.
Sometimes my memory goes back that far, and sometimes it doesn't. If I'm
Mhm.
jogged, my memory is jogged, I can think of something. But off of the top of my head, I think one of the probably pivotal moments for me when I was probably in the fourth or fifth grade, I was being bullied by someone who her name was Sandra Love, and she was everything but lovely.
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
And that moment of being bullied, I had turned to my mom for support.
Mhm.
And like I said, my mom, she's very not soft spoken, but she
Yep.
can take a lot.
Mhm.
And the way that she presents herself is proper and it's
Mhm.
appropriate.
Yeah,
But
very
I
well.
wanted her to turn up a little bit,
Yeah,
just a
exactly.
little bit, because somebody's messing with her baby.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I wanted my aunt who has that fire to come up to
Yeah.
the school and just put everything at ease.
Wreck it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
so my mom, she is just so graceful,
Mhm.
in her presence and in her appearance. And I was telling all of my friends that she was going to come up to school and she was going to like put this girl in her place. Well, she came up to the school,
Mhm.
but she had different plans than I had.
Oh,
She went
wow.
to go and talk to the administration That's not what
Mhm.
I wanted. I wanted
No.
her to like buck wild and
Yeah,
just like lose
exactly.
it. But that never
Yeah,
happened.
yeah.
The bullying never stopped, but it was a moment, a point in time for me that was defining because I got to figure out who my mother is and who my
Mhm.
mother wasn't.
Oh, okay.
And I picked out some things from that event that I instill in me today. I have three daughters. They're all
Mhm.
adults.
Yep.
And when they were growing up, they didn't have any bullies because I didn't play that because I
Yep,
had a
yep.
little bit of my aunt in me.
Because
And
you experienced it yourself, so you're just kind of like, I'm not allowing. I have this defensive feeling, but I'll get into that. Go ahead.
yeah, and so I'm not tolerating that with my kids, and I just wasn't having it. And so, like your friend, whose father was at the games and things like that, I was that mom because I worked for myself. So I was
Mhm.
always at the school anytime there was any type of anything going on, good or bad, I was there. And that's something that I didn't necessarily have growing up because, like I said, my mom was single, a single parent. She
Mhm.
worked the midnight shift at the post office where she stayed for like 20 some years.
Yep.
And when she was off, she was asleep. And so
Mhm.
I had a lot of free time on my
Correct.
hands to be able to dibble and dab in the good and in the bad.
Mhm.
But I say all that to say is that probably was the defining moment for me when I decided the type of mother that I was going to be to my unborn children.
Mhm. No, that's amazing. I was I'm chuckling because this story reminded me of something that happened to me when I was a kid, right? So I was at the bus stop one day, and this kid was older, and everybody was scared of this kid because he was a problem, right? He actually ended up serving 18 years in prison
Mm.
for a bank robbery. So that just kind of just lets you know the type of environment that I was in. But anyways, we're at the bus stop, and then out of nowhere, he sucker punches me. Right.
Mm.
So my brother is there. He's older, but he's definitely fearful. Right. And I never really got my parents involved in what was going on in the streets and stuff like that. But this one particular, I was just so mad. I just told my dad, I was like, this kid just punched me for no reason. His name was Blunt Cooper, so blunt like a blunt. And so my dad comes to the bus stop, right? And I remember I was just kind of like nervous like that. My dad was at the bus stop or whatever. So the kids are on the bus, and I get on the bus, and then my dad jumps in on the bus, right? And he says, show him to me, show him where he's at, right? And they sit all the way in the back of the bus, right? So then we walk back there. I was like, him, right? And then I remember being scared for my dad, but you're in elementary school, but this is how bad the situation was, right? I remember him, and then probably like other four other boys like stood up, and I was like, oh my god, they're gonna jump my dad. But I remember my dad saying, you don't ever touch my son ever again, right? And I remember that moment because he never bothered me ever again, you know. And that was all that it took. But kind of similar to you, because of my experiences, it makes me very like possessive. Like, well, I'm not playing that with people, right? I'm not gonna allow this thing to happen to them again. It made it very challenging for me in a lot of ways, and that's kind of how I parent or address it. But I have my kids in combat sports, so that just kind of lets you know when time is right for them, they'll be okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, what were your grades like growing up? Were you a good student, or did you kind of struggle in that department?
Oh my gosh. I was a horrible student. I think I
Hmm.
was a horrible kid, like, especially in my teenage years, because, like
Yeah.
I said, I was just like a loose cannon.
Mm-hmm.
And what made it so bad is when I was 16 years old, I had this brilliant idea that I wanted to move out on my own.
Oh wow.
Again, my mom made it look really easy. And so I thought I could handle it as a 16-year-old. So I'm in the 11th grade. I have my own car and my own apartment.
Oh
You couldn't
wow.
tell me nothing,
Oh wow.
right?
Wow.
Like,
Wow. You
what
know
is the
what I mean?
teacher going to tell me? I got my own car and I've seen teachers like on the bus stop after
Yeah.
school. My head was just too big, just
Yeah.
too big.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I didn't recognize it then. I recognize it now. But at 16 years old, I moved out.
You moved
And
out.
my
Yeah.
mom, she told me, because I got a check from my father since he passed away, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so my mom would use that money that I was getting monthly to pay for my rent. But she made it clear that you're on your own. You're going to have to pay for everything else if you want to do this. She said no at first for a couple times, but then I convinced her yes. And she said you're going to have to pay your light, for your food, your utilities, like all of that stuff. And I'm just like, okay, no problem. But just eager to get a yes out of her.
Yep.
And the first month, she set me up with food. My refrigerator was stocked. She gave me some of her like pots and pans. She filled up my like my laundry area with laundry detergent. She set me up the first month, so I was good to go.
Yeah.
And then all of that stuff ran out. And I was on my own. And so I'm thinking I'm just gonna phone home and I'm
Yeah.
gonna
And then
say, Mom,
replenish it like you're good
yeah,
now, right? Yeah.
I need some support. And she said, no,
Yeah.
absolutely not. I told you, and that probably was the first time that my mother told me no.
Mm-hmm.
And it was defining again because I had to figure things out on my own. I had to
Mm-hmm.
figure out what I was going to do. And so I went to school and I printed out flyers like, I'll do anything,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was cleaning, cooking, walking your dog, doing your hair, like whatever the
Okay.
thing, like anything,
Re-
any service type of thing, I was willing to
resilience.
do.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And I printed out these flyers, I plastered them in my neighborhood. And before I know it, my phone was ringing and
Mm-hmm.
it worked.
Yeah. Good.
And
Mm-hmm.
here it is. I'm 16, and it was hair that was the staple for me. And I would
Uh-huh.
have like a living room full of women who were just waiting for me to like do their hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so rich, you couldn't tell
Yeah,
me
exactly.
nothing.
Yeah. So it worked out for you
when I
again.
when I went to school, my head was so big, my grades were horrible in the floor because I didn't even understand why I was there and why school was important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wound up dropping out in the 11th grade because I
Oh
thought I
wow.
knew it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't graduate high school. And when it was time to graduate the following year, I told my mom like I had a stomach ache or something like that, some lie.
Mm-hmm.
But she had a cruise set up for graduation for us to go on. I went on that cruise with a straight face.
You did? Oh
I
wow.
never told her as a child or a teenager that I had dropped out of school. I couldn't
Oh, she didn't
I
know.
mm-mm.
Oh
I
wow.
could not I couldn't deal with the
You couldn't face it.
disappointment
Yeah,
that
the
I would have
disappointment.
caused
Yeah,
her.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I kept it a secret for a really long time, like years, years. But now I am on the quest of earning my PhD, and so my grades today are completely different
Correct, 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 correct,
than
correct.
what they were when I was growing up. Now I have
Mm-hmm.
such an affinity for education and
Mm-hmm.
learning that I didn't have back then. And it's beautiful to be able
Mm-hmm.
to learn and expand your mind and, to just take in new information.
No, for sure. I mean, I had a not uh I have a similar experience, an opposite experience to what you're describing, right? So for me, I was in dropout prevention. I was one of the bad kids. My grades were mainly all Fs. I struggled to. I was behind. I remember in the eighth grade, I had a fourth fifth grade reading level. I was really behind. It was a combination of the environment. English wasn't my primary language. It was a whole bunch of different things. And I remember in the eighth grade where this switch happened, and I just started to apply myself, and my grades got better. And then freshman year, they were like 3.6, 3.7. Like they were really good. I never got below a 3.0 after. But I wasn't dumb. But I remember when I got to college, I never completed a book before, right? And when I got there, there was this class. It was very good. I forget the name of it now, but I finished my first book cover to cover, and that was I think I was a freshman then. And then I kind of went through school, graduated, but I kind of took a little hiatus from learning. But then COVID happened, and then when COVID happened, I picked up another book for the first time, and it was Start with Why, and that
Mm,
just triggered everything in me. I felt like I grew like right after that book. And
wow.
since then I've read over like 120 books, and our kids have a library over 200 books. My daughter's reading like out of the stratosphere and writing and stuff like that. So it's this complete opposite from where you were, so that's kind of cool to see.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Books are amazing. I love them.
Yep. So we want to dive a little into your story, and I'm just gonna kind of just let you kind of go because you get older. Okay, let's take it step by step, I guess. So after high school, well, you dropped out of high school, right? What happened after that? What start? How did you move forward from there? Right, you're living on your own.
Mhm.
Do you start your career? What was your first business? What did that look like?
Yeah, so like I said, I started out with maybe 100 flyers that I had made at school in the guidance counselor's office that I
Mhm.
had printed out, plastered them all in my neighborhood, and I became busy almost immediately. And that lasted for a couple of years that I was doing people's hair in my living room with no license
Mhm.
because I mean, I wasn't doing like chemicals and
Correct.
things like that,
Yeah.
just mostly styling.
Mhm.
But to go to cosmetology school, you needed to have a high school diploma that I didn't have.
Yeah.
And I played around with the idea, but getting a GED felt so intimidating to me because I was never a good test taker.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was just going to fail. And so I never went that route. What I did do was I got into real estate at an early age, probably like 25, around like 20, 24, 25. And the rest is history as it relates to real estate because one, you do need a high school diploma to be a realtor, but I lied on my application and nobody ever checked. And so
No.
that little box that says, like, are you a high school graduate? I just
Yeah.
said yes and
You
kept
just
it
yes.
moving.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay. You passed the
And
test, so that's what
I
matters.
passed the test. It took me a couple tries,
Mhm.
but I did pass the test.
Mhm.
But I did go back and get my high school diploma when my oldest daughter was about 16,
Mhm.
17 years old.
Yeah.
It was like life was coming full circle.
Yeah.
And she was college bound, and she made a bet with me that let's both go to school, to college, and let's see who can finish first. And we
Oh.
both were kind of like competitive in nature, not so much with each other, but just in nature. We're both competitive type of people.
Mhm.
And I was like, game on. And so I was kind of like tired of like that dark cloud over my head about
Of
my
not completing.
education.
Yeah. Exactly.
And because I learned to read like business books early on, and I attended workshops early on and seminars and things like that, I
Mhm.
knew how to present myself and I knew how to carry myself in public. And so I never spoke ghetto
Mhm.
or in a way that people would question my education,
Yeah.
most of the time people would give me more credit for having the education that I didn't have. And I
Right.
would
Right. Right.
never change their mind about that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just let people believe what they wanted to believe. But on the inside, I knew that that was something that was unfinished with me.
Yeah.
And so here in Maryland, they have this program called the External Diploma Program. And
Mm-hmm.
that program is not a GED because you graduate with your high school diploma. And I wanted to finish what I started. And so I went that route. And then I graduated. I walked across the stage with my cap and gown,
Okay.
with my kids, there for me with my high school diploma. And
Mm-hmm.
I had to be like in my 30s at that point in time.
Yeah.
And then from there, I wound up going to university where it took me about 7 years to graduate because at first I was taking about one class here,
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
classes, and it
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't really, it wasn't even really part-time. It was just, I was just
You're
attending
just taking stuff. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
as I could, yeah. And then it wasn't until I graduated, um, during COVID, actually, that I decided to continue on my education and to get my master's. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'll be graduating in the spring with my master's, and then I'll be going on to get my PhD beginning in the fall of this year. So this
Okay.
year is packed with
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. No, 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 for sure. You're making the move, right? You're making up for lost ground.
Yeah, and so it's just interesting to me now because growing up I had no appreciation for knowledge whatsoever, and
Hmm.
now it consumes me because I love it so much. And I just wish that I had gotten this whiff of knowledge years ago, but everything happens in a perfect time anyway, so it's all good.
No, for sure. I know for me, I constantly have something in my ears. I'm constantly consuming information. I think it was in 2020 when I made the decision to be a lifelong learner. So, and committing to learning about, all things,
Mhm.
that includes, diving into my faith. So the first, I would say 2020, I dove into about 30 something books that year. And then it was like the end of 21. I had dove into a whole bunch of more books. And then I said, what if I chased God the way that I'm chasing, these books and trying to gain this knowledge? Because I want to be closer to him. So I want to know if does that play an aspect for you, or do you have a relationship with faith, etc.?
Yeah, I would say from an early age, probably 5, I was feeling different,
Hmm.
in the aspect like my grandmother, she passed away at 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the church and like being afraid to put my feet on the floor because I thought like the demons were gonna like pull me down to hell.
Oh wow.
So I never like put my feet on the floor in the church. But there was just I felt like a pull on me back then. And so my grandfather, this is on my father's side,
Yeah.
my grandfather, my dad's father, he was a deacon in the church. And I remember saying to him one day, can I go to church with you? And he said yes. But when it was time to go to church, this wasn't like a Sunday, this was like during the week.
Hmm.
And he said yes. But when it was time to go, he just left. And I remember
He
walking,
forgot.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Well,
You don't know?
my
Yeah.
grandfather, he was interesting. The stories that I hear from like my mom and my aunts,
Yeah.
he was a player basically, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
he didn't want no little girl tagging behind him while he was doing his thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And so I wound up walking at least a mile or two to get to the church. And I remember getting there, going through the back of the church because the front building was locked.
Hmm.
And him just being shocked and seeing me. And I was like, you said you was going to take me to church.
Oh, wow.
And you didn't. And I wound up going visiting church members who were on their deathbed, basically, in the hospitals. And he visited some church members in their home and prayed for them. And that there was something in me. And then I was like, wow, I want a part of that. And my mom, like, to forward it a couple years, my mom, like I said, she worked the post office, so she slept during the days most of the time. And so I would call my uncle Eddie, who was also a deacon in the church, and he would take me to church every Sunday. He would pick me up like clockwork, and I
Mhm.
look forward to going to church on Sundays and riding with him. He was almost kind of like my father figure, growing up. And that time and spending time with him was just so remarkable. I'll never forget it. He's gone on to glory now, but
Yeah.
I would say it started from a very young age. And then as I grew, I realized that there was just a part of me that had to surrender
Mhm.
to that higher power. And, I call myself a Christian, but I really feel like I'm just a spiritual being out here trying to be obedient and trying to be more Christ like on a daily basis. I mean, we never all get it right.
Mhm.
But I do my best to be the best person that God has made me to be each and every day. I try to show up that way.
No, for sure. I could relate to that. I have these conversations with my friends all the time. It's like I'm a spirit having a human experience, and there's a number of things in my human experience may not fully make sense. I don't attach myself to a lot of things that are, are earthly. I kind of really look at it as this separation, because that's really what it is. And then this is just a trial period that, we're having as, as spirits, on earth. So um we were chatting a little bit the other day, before we got on here, and you were telling me a little bit more about your story, and I know your faith will come into play a little bit later once we kind of, jump into that. So,
Hmm.
I kind of just want to give you the floor and kind of just share these other parts of your story, however you
Yeah.
feel fit. Good.
So, so it's interesting that we're having this conversation about my childhood and my upbringing, and I find that to be very refreshing. I didn't know that we were going to go there. I thought we were just going to talk about my story, right?
Yeah.
Um, but it's been good because now you have the backstory of how I grew up and all that good stuff. And so, where I will begin is to say that my career in real estate, again, it took off and I was
Mhm.
doing well. I wound up meeting a guy. We were the same age. We wound up getting married and started a family.
Yeah.
And so life was pretty for a really long time. And then that didn't work out. With him, we stayed married for like 13 or 15 years, something like that. And then I decided that that wasn't what I wanted to do anymore.
Mhm.
And I had three girls, and we went our way, and we were still doing very well. From real estate during the recession, the first time in like oh 09, 06.
Yeah.
um I was like, I want to do something different. And so I started a magazine, the first magazine for women entrepreneurs. I called it Shepreneur.
Mhm.
And I grew that from 0 to 50,000 subscribers nationwide in just under 9 months.
Oh, wow.
And it was phenomenal. But then there was a recession in the advertising industry that
Mhm.
caused me to pull back from that. And then I said, well, you know what? I want to do something that's more meaningful, something that is more impactful in the community. And I realized who I was as a young girl and the things that I didn't have. And I wanted to pour that into young girls that were in middle and high school. So I started a nonprofit, an organization that mentored teen girls. The foundation was business, and I will partner them up with mentors in the community that had like interests and similarities to the young girl. So if a girl came to me and she said she wanted to be an astronaut. I will
Mhm.
find another astronaut in the
Yep.
community
Yep, yep,
that's
yep.
upstanding, put them through the background check and all that stuff, and
Yeah,
partner them up together, and then they would build a relationship from there.
that's cool.
It was really cool, but
Mhm.
then life happened. Life happened. My oldest daughter met a guy, a boy rather.
Mhm. Yep, yep, yep.
And you know, those girls when they get their first boyfriend can be a little giddy and a little silly at times. And
Cuckoos.
she started changing. She
Yeah.
started changing for the worse in our relationship because she started lying, sneaking, doing things that she wasn't normally doing.
Mhm.
And I caught her in a lie one day and I took her cell phone away from her. And the next day, she ran away from home.
Oh, wow.
And that was so devastating for me. And I said, you know, to myself, okay, you know, she's made a decision to leave home. And I became like really depressed after that. This is my firstborn child who
Mhm.
is essentially telling me, I don't want to live with you anymore.
Mhm.
And it was devastating to me, and it tore up our unit with the three girls and me, right? And
Yeah.
so it was straining and difficult to continue on with the business aspect of it,
Yeah.
because here it is, I'm mentoring young girls and I can't even reach my own daughter. And
Correct, correct,
so
correct.
I started to feel like a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And right before I really beat myself up, my middle daughter also ran away from home.
Mm.
So here it is. I have two daughters within like a 6 month span who ran away from home, who want nothing to do with me anymore. Because, like you were talking about, being like possessive over your kids in a sense, not like in a
Yeah.
negative way,
Yep, yep, yep.
but we had rules, we
Correct.
had guidelines and perimeters that they just couldn't cross with me.
Correct,
But
correct, correct.
they were living with other family members and they were just running havoc, you know, like with all this newfound freedom that they had.
Mhm.
And
And
so, go ahead.
no, 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 because I remember what was like going through your mind during this time, right? Did you go to the police and what did they say to you? What was like? What was everything going on in regards to them running away?
So, with my first daughter running away, my oldest daughter, she left me a note pretty much saying that she was not coming back. She didn't like how I handled her. She thought that I treated her like a child and I wasn't allowing her to grow up. In hindsight, she was right. She was
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Mhm.
But in the moment, I was that parent who is trying to teach you a lesson,
Mhm.
and taking her cell phone, especially with the new guy that she had, was a no-no in her book. And so she made
Mhm.
the choice to like never come back.
Mhm.
So she was staying with a family member in like another state, and they were like getting her back and forth to school. And I just heard this through the grapevine from my mom.
Mhm.
When my middle daughter ran away, it was a little different. It was different in the aspect of she had um was failing in school, and
Mm.
I didn't tolerate that. And so I told her she had to get her grades up, but she had just gotten her first job. And I was like, this job has to go. You can't manage both of them. You need to focus on school.
Yeah.
And so she just didn't come home one day. And I did call the police because I'm like, where is my child? I had
Mhm.
no idea that she was just like out there, you know, this whole time. And so I did call the police. The police got involved. And she wound up coming home like later on that night. And it was a horrible experience for both of us because I was like, where are you? Where were you?
Mhm.
And her response was, I wanted you to know what it felt like to lose something that you loved. And I lost it, Sam. I mean, I
Yeah.
lost it. Like, who the hell are you to tell
Yeah, baby.
me that I'm your mother? You
Mhm.
know, and to be so defiant. And she was so confident in her statement that I just
Yeah.
lost it. I just lost it.
Mhm.
And so she never came back. And so after that, um, I wound up going into this deep depression. And the depression it had such a hold on me that I couldn't shake it. And I wind up trying to commit suicide. I thought that I was so worthless. I thought that there was no future for me. I thought, like, if I can't be this good mother that I had set out to be, then there is no point in continuing on. Now, mind you, I still had a young daughter, my youngest daughter, who at the time she was like 11 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she was going through a loss of her sisters, but I
Right.
couldn't recognize that because I was just so caught up in my own hurt, in my own pain, that I neglected her, not realizing that we could have fed each other,
Mm-hmm. For
you
sure.
know, but I wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And so to fast forward, I attempt suicide. I burnt my house down with me in it because I wanted to die.
Oh,
And
wow.
I wound up getting arrested for arson because you can't go around burning stuff down, right?
Correct. 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 Correct.
So I go to jail and I'm confronted with everything that has gotten me to this point emotionally. And I made a promise to God at that point, like, if you get me out of this, I will serve you, I will worship you, I will do whatever it is that you need me to do to let people know that you are the light and
Yeah.
there is
Exactly.
light at the end of the tunnel. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wound up having to sit in jail for 30 days. I was denied bail 3 times before I was let out on my own recognizance. But that took about 30 days for that to happen.
Yeah.
When I get out of jail, I met, I was confronted with no place to stay. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to go and live with my mother for the first time since I was 16 years old. And that was so humbling. I can't
For
even
sure.
express
Mm-hmm.
in words what that was like. With my daughter, my young daughter, at that time. And it was a challenge, but I gave myself 6 months to get back on my feet and to get my own place because that was not going to be my final destination. And
Mm-hmm.
I was so fired up to make sure that I was out of her house within like 6 months. And that to the almost to the T, 6 months to the T, I was out. I had wound up finding an apartment, well, a townhouse that I rented, and my daughter came with me, and the rest is just, it was history because I made up in my mind that that's what I was going to do, and I did it. And ever since then, I have been telling people about the goodness of God and spreading my message of hope, because if I could have overcome all that I've went through,
Yeah.
then there is no way that anyone else has to stay stuck in their
Mm-hmm.
position where they are if they just look at the life that I have lived, knowing that you can come out on the other side of it, but you do have to fight. You do have to put in the work. You do have to roll your sleeves up and get dirty a little bit. And I did all of that grunt work so that I can get to a place of where I am today.
No, for sure. You definitely did. So there's multiple aspects happening here, right? You have your base, which is, you were on your own before. You know how to do it. You had to fight and to get on your feet, at an early age. And then you have this situation that you're encountering where you have to do the same thing again, but this time you have to rely rely on God because you're in a, a sunken place or a low place. I could really relate to that because um until I started really kind of vocalizing the my experiences and stuff like that, I felt very, trapped. I was kind of more like, isolated, I felt like. And it wasn't until I went to therapy and stuff like that, I was like, you know what, Sam, you got a pretty special story to tell, so you need to start using these experiences as a strength and not looking at them as a weakness, because you really have a powerful story to tell.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so all right. So you're living with your mom now, and then you give yourself 6 months to get back on your feet. you get it done, right? And you're getting back on your feet. And then what happened from there?
So from there, I go furniture shopping because my bank account is where it needs to be in order for
Yeah,
me to get where I need to be, right? And
correct.
so now we're furniture shopping. We're going to fill this house up and we're going to make this house a home.
Yeah.
And I remember furniture being delivered to my house, and I struck up this beautiful conversation with the delivery guy. And the delivery guy, we were talking about church, we were talking about just our faith, and it was
Hmm.
just such a rich conversation. So when
Yeah.
he was leaving, he asked if he could have my number. No, he asked if he could call me. He already had my number.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
But
Hmm.
he was like, "Can I call you?" And I was so taken off guard because
Hmm.
one, here it is, just 6 months prior, I was in a jail
Hmm.
and I was in there for attempted suicide.
Yeah.
And here it is, just 6 months later, this guy shows up. And so I was scared because I'm still healing. I'm still recovering. Yes, I'm in therapy, but I'm not all
Yeah.
the way there yet. I'm
Correct.
still
Correct. Correct. Correct.
dealing with the hurt and the pain and the betrayal
Hmm.
that I felt. Um, I'm the hurt and pain that I had felt. And so it was just so traumatizing for me to even think about having a relationship. And I wound up saying, yes, you can call me.
Hmm.
And we dated for about like 6 months. And then he proposed to me, and we got married like 3 months later. So, all within a span of like a year, my
Hmm.
trajectory changed from being in jail to now being married in a happy relationship. And I didn't know what to do with all of that besides call it a blessing.
Hmm.
Because when I looked at it in retrospect, he was everything that I had asked for in a man. And I was so overwhelmed that God would be so good to me to bless me with
Hmm.
another human being who had his heart, who understood my story.
Yeah.
He never showed me any judgment.
Hmm.
He never like gave me the cold shoulder once I told him everything that I was
Everything.
going
Yeah.
through.
Yeah. And you
He
were
was
in it.
there for me. Yeah,
Yeah.
he
You
was
were in it.
there for
Yeah.
me. And I
Hmm.
so appreciated that because it could have totally went the other way. He could have totally said, "No, I don't want to be bothered, with all of this." Because mind you, I was out of jail, but I still had a whole trial
Yeah.
that
But
I had to go through and that I had to get through. That part wasn't over.
yeah.
And I hadn't even started my trial when I met him. So it was a lot that he was taking on when he decided to take me on and date me,
Hmm.
and he was all game for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. He's a trooper for sure.
Yeah.
If you know he could be there for you, that was like your low moment, right? And
Yep.
he's there for you, and he's like, hey, we're going through this season together, right? And
Yeah.
he wants to be present. It sounds like an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So we've been married today. It'll be 7 years this year
Hmm.
that we've been together, and it's been a joyous ride. I can't say that it's been all roses because we're human being and we
Correct, correct,
do
correct.
bump heads at times, but overall it has been a joyous ride.
Great. I mean, that's amazing. I'm happy. I'm happy for you.
Thank
Right. So now let's so you when do you become a author, right? So because we didn't get into your writing. When did that start for you, and how is that going?
So, interestingly enough, when I was in jail, a guard had offered me a pen and paper. And before then, I had never wrote anything outside of like a business setting, like a correspondence, an email, marketing materials, and things like that. But I had never wrote like in a journal, and I had never wrote creatively before. And so there was an outpouring of emotion for me in jail writing just whatever was on my heart. And I began to unravel a lot of the darkness that I was feeling. And a lot of it had to do with shame and guilt. What I didn't tell you is that while my daughters had left the home, they were
Mm-hmm.
living with my mother, and I didn't know.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I went to take my youngest daughter to my mom, and I walked in because I had a key, and I seen my two daughters like running so that I wouldn't see them. And I was just so devastated. Like, my mother knew the heartache that I was experiencing. She knew because she was my best friend.
Yeah.
She knew all the pain that I was enduring. And to have my daughters living with her without me knowing it, I didn't know how to handle that. And so I cut her off for
Mm.
like a good 6 months or so, until one day I just decided that I was tired of suffering. And
Right.
part of
'Cause
that started to come out in my writing when I was in jail.
Mhm.
So just releasing myself from all of the hurt, all of the betrayal, all of the everything that I was feeling, it began to just pour out of me on the paper. One
Mhm.
page turned into two, and two turned into three. And before you know it, I had like 10 pieces of paper in
Mhm.
front of me that were all just emotion that I was just pouring out.
For
And
sure.
so I realized in that moment that I had a story to tell. I realized that everyone who knew me in a professional setting, they would never imagine that I had ended up in jail over an
Mhm.
attempted suicide.
Yep,
Because
yep, yep.
Christians don't try to do that, first and foremost. Black
No.
people don't do that, first and
No.
foremost.
Mhm.
And it's like the audacity that I had back then to even say that I wanted to have that much control over my life that I was willing to take it.
Mhm.
It was just overpowering me, like all of the emotions.
Yep, yep, yep.
So as I get out of jail, mind you, I'm also a college student at this time,
Mhm.
and my major was business naturally. And I changed it to English because I wanted to learn how to write for other people if I'm going to tell this story. And so I went and started my English career and took my first creative writing class and nailed it.
Mhm.
And from there, when I graduated from undergrad, I went straight into a master's program that teaches me writing and publishing, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And so, after about 2 years in the program and taking all these classes around publishing and writing, I had the confidence because, mind you, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 16.
Yep.
I'm not scared to start a business.
No,
And
for sure.
so
Yeah.
I was like, after 2 years of being trained in writing and publishing, I felt confident enough that I had enough resources and tools in my tool belt to be able to start something meaningful. But I found writing a whole book to be a bit daunting and overwhelming. Like, which
Mhm.
part goes where, and how do you say this without being too much, and this, and that.
Yep.
And so I said, wow, if I'm having this challenge because I believe that we're more alike than we are different, then there
Mhm.
has to be other people out there too who are having the same experience of writing a book. And
Yeah.
so I just posted on my Facebook page, hey, who out there is willing to write a story, a book with me about mental health?
Mhm.
And over 200 some women raised their hands saying me. And from there, I knew that I was on to a concept that I couldn't deny. And so I put together this business like almost like on a napkin. And
Mhm.
I said the first book came out in 2023 called Speak Up Against Stigma, Her Mental Health Journey. Now I'm about to publish my second anthology this May 6th, actually. It's going to
Mhm.
be coming out. That's the second book. And I want to do it, publish a book on mental health every May without even thinking about it because May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and God has
Hmm.
afforded me the opportunity to be able to do that. So this
For sure.
year, I have 12 more writers. So that's 12 chapters. Each author gets a chapter where they
Hmm.
are telling their story, and they're telling their story from their perspective. And every story is different because
Very, yeah,
mental health doesn't have just one face.
it doesn't.
Mental health
No.
doesn't just identify with white people or black people or women or girls or teenagers. It
Hmm.
will attack anyone for any reason. If you live long enough, you will be impacted by mental health. Mental
For sure.
health is something that impacts us all. It's not just their problem or someone else's problem. It
Hmm.
affects us all.
Yeah, yep. It's your personal your personal problem for sure. And if you one, it takes a level of awareness to know and understand that, hey, listen, there might be something going on, and there's things that happen in our past that it's connected to that triggers it and stuff like that. And I've had my fair share of that as well. And it wasn't until 2021 where something caught me off guard that I it alerted me to, hey, listen, Sam, maybe you need to pay attention to what's going on around you and what happened to you in the past. And then now I could speak freely about it so I could help others, address that. So yes, that's beautiful.
That is amazing. I
Hmm.
believe, like I said, that we're more alike than we are different.
Hmm.
And it's stories that connect us. And I believe that the more people that tell their story, the more ammunition that we have against the stigma to break it down and dismantle it. Because if someone is going through something and they don't know how they're going to get out of it, and they hear that someone else went through something similar,
Yeah.
or something even more devastating than what they went through, then now they have hope. Now they can believe in themselves. And now they can say that I too can rise and get over this situation and
For
get
sure.
through it to go to the other side. It's possible through storytelling.
Yep. And that's the thing that I realized too. And so I tell a lot of stories because it has a way of bringing you to a perspective, one that you probably have never seen before. And then from there, sharing the wisdom that, God has given me to be able to kind of shine light on a specific thing. So that storytelling aspect is very important. So that's why I always get everybody's backstory on how they were as a child, because it does relate into entrepreneurship later, because there's these foundational things that you kind of go through. And in entrepreneurship, it requires you to have a certain zest or zeal or inspiration from the inside, right? To continue to be on this chase, because it's not easy. It's not
Yeah,
easy to be an entrepreneur, right? You
you're
gotta
right.
you gotta eat what you kill, and take a step, and building a business too takes time. So that's why.
Mhm.
Hmm. So
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
so
It's
where
not easy. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint and heart. I think a lot of times people who have a typical 9 to 5, or maybe they have some aspirations of starting their own business, they think that it comes with all this freedom that you get to do what you want to do, but that could be far from the truth.
right,
Because especially in the beginning, you are grinding, you
you are
are getting
grinding.
the word out there, you are
Yep.
working, you putting the sweat in, your sweat
Yeah.
equity, all of
Sweat
that.
equity for
Like,
sure.
it
No,
does not
100%.
happen right away.
Yeah.
It takes a while, and that's through diligence and consistency,
Hmm.
and showing up every day.
Yeah.
But without that, like the Bible says, a man don't work, a man don't eat. So you
Correct.
gotta
Correct. Correct.
be working every day, even if it's for yourself, you still have to bring that same work ethic to the table as if you were working for someone else.
No, for sure. Absolutely. So, um, I need to get your book link. So tell us, before we go, I always ask, what is your best lessons learned from life and in business?
Let's see. One of my lessons or takeaways from life is failure is so important. to the journey. And oftentimes we try to avoid failure because it stings and it hurts and it's embarrassing. But that is the grit that will make you into who you are and who you are becoming. It is the lessons that you learn from your failures that will allow you to be able to stand 10 toes deep on the things that you believe in because of the things that you went through. So failure to me is a plus. Anytime you can fail, don't look at it necessarily as a failure, but look at it as a lesson
Yeah,
that you
to
can
grow from.
learn to
Hmm.
build on top of, because it's just all information. It's
Yeah,
information of letting you know that maybe you need to redirect or do
correct,
something different, but it's not the end of the world. It is
correct,
not.
correct. Couldn't agree more. And then that you tied those both into business as well, because that is a good business lesson, because at the end of each as a contractor or any transaction, for that part, I do a lessons learned meeting, which is a full download of how that transaction went, who were the people involved, what went well, what didn't go well, what could we change in the future, which is something I feel very strongly about. Even with my kids, there's this shirt that I'm gonna make them, and it, because they wrestle, is it's I win or I learn. Either way, I never lose, right?
I love
Because
it.
it's just a mindset, because that loss teaches you so much. It teaches you what not to do, or it teaches you, hey, listen, you don't got it all right yet. So how do I figure things out? But I'm gonna just give you the floor.
I love that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would tie personal and business in together because for a long time in my personal life, I looked at failure as an embarrassment, not as a lesson. And in business, no one wants to fail. And so I personally had a hard time getting to embrace my failures and my shortcomings.
Yeah.
And so to be able to be at a point now where I will say, like this is a lesson and not a failure. And so it applies to both realms of me, personal and professionally.
No, for sure. And that completely resonates with me because it's the same thing. Business and life are pretty much tied together interchangeably. So just wanted to say thank you again for blessing us with your time. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you guys for watching the Pro Design Builder. It's not just about building a business, it's about building a vision and a life by design.